Hello, hello! Welcome to Sprout Sessions. I'm Vera Flores and I work in community and brand advocacy here at Sprout, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this session today. It's sure to be a great one. Our goal with Sprout Sessions is to bring our industry together and arm you with insights to deepen your strategy and gain new perspective on topics that are truly relevant to your brand's bottom line. We hope you can take away some actionable tips on how to apply these best practices to your social strategy, as well as inspiration for ways to grow. We'll jump into the content in just a minute, but first let's go over a few housekeeping items. These sessions will be recorded, and you can access them immediately following the presentation on our YouTube page. If you need to step out or head out early, don't worry, you'll be able to access everything after the session. Get social with it. We encourage all of you to engage with us and your fellow professionals on social. Tweet @SproutSocial or use the hashtag #SproutSessions to ask questions, share your favorite bits of content, or just follow along with the conversation. Lastly, we'll have a Q&A at the end of this presentation, so feel free to ask questions throughout the session by using the chat box to the right of the screen. Now let's get this session started. Allow me to pass it over to Lizz Kannenberg of Sprout Social to introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, I am Lizz Kannenberg. I lead up content here at Sprout. And prior to coming to Sprout, I spent 10 years at advertising agencies where I led social strategy and social creative development for some big global brands. And I'm happy to talk to you guys today about what it costs to create great social content, how you can do it in any situation on any budget. So some of the big things we'll be talking about today are laying the foundation, so making sure your content is doing as much for you as possible, choosing the right approach for your resources, your timelines, your budgets to creating content, and not being afraid of using unique and sometimes strategic ways to scale your content creation. So first of all, laying the foundation. Biggest point to remember is that as a brand, you need to know yourself. And 3 key ways to do that are make sure audience insights are the core of your strategy. Know who your audience is, what they want on social, and what they could potentially get from your brand that would fill those needs. Have some clear social objectives, focus on achievable and impactful things that you want your brand to be able to get out of social, whether it's awareness or trial or advocacy. The full marketing funnel is at your disposal. And then finally, defining success. So hold yourself accountable at every step of the process and make sure that measuring your content is an iterative process to make you better. So first of all, audience insights. Be a social media anthropologist. Get in there, see what the people you're trying to reach are doing in social, how they talk, what they talk about, what they're sharing, what seems to resonate with them. That's where you're going to find opportunities for your brand to align brand messaging with the stuff they already care about. Listen and react like a human. We all know that there are humans behind every brand on social, but don't be afraid to be like a human. Talk like your audience talks, engage with them in the way they're engaging with each other, building authenticity and making your content a little bit more resonant. And then finally, build personas. I think we get hung up on the demographic data that we can pull from audience insights, and we forget that these are real people and that they have passions and that they have things that motivate them and that they have reasons for being in social that don't come out in how old they are or what their gender is or what else they follow. Defining clear social objectives goes down to where you want social to sit in your marketing funnel, and the content should be commensurate with where you want to be in the marketing funnel. So if you're on the left side of that, where awareness is a really big thing for your brand, you're trying to make people aware that you're out there and that you have a product that fills a particular need, then the content needs to be provocative and memorable and actionable. It needs to evoke some sort of emotion. It needs to stand out in the news feed. It also needs to be memorable that your brand was the one providing that content. And if you want someone to do something with it, you have to be really clear. That actionable call to action that you want them to click through to the website, or you want them to share it, or you want them to respond to it, has to be super, super clear, because they don't know who your brand is yet, and this may be their first exposure to it. As you get a little further to the right and you're talking about trial and conversion, when you want them to be standing at the shelf and they already know who your brand is, but they have to make that decision to buy you, that's where you want your content to feel relevant, so that it's made a connection to them, something that's important to them in their lives. And then it's also recognizable that, hey, I saw something on Facebook from this brand and now I'm connecting with it when I see the brand in front of me in the store. And then also encouraging, make them feel good about the decision to buy your product or to use your service, something they may have been considering already. And now you've given them, your social content has given them that little feel good push to actually take the next step and become a consumer. When you get to the furthest right side, where you're talking loyalty and advocacy with the people who already love your brand and have raised their hand to follow you in social and are willing to engage with you and are ultimately willing to become the awareness driver for new people when they tell their friends or they tell people in their social circles that they love your product, that's where you want your content to start to feel familiar to them, so that there are themes. So they know if I share this image from this brand and someone decides to follow that brand, they're going to see similar stuff. So you're not selling them a false bill of goods with a piece of content that's not in line with everything else you've shared. It's also got to be inspiring. It's got to help bring them into your story. So if you're a CPG brand, say you make cheese, ask people how they're using your cheese and make that a part of your story, and then reward them for that. Engage with them. It can be as easy as just acknowledging that they shared something, and as built out as a contest or a promotion that brings your loyal advocates to the forefront. And then when we're talking definition of success and we're starting to think about why things work and why they don't, figure out why. Don't just say, all right, this type of content didn't work, so we're never going to do it again. Or this type of content worked, so we're always going to do it. The why is the most important part, and that helps you drill down to content that resonates with an audience consistently. Okay, so you kind of know who your audience is and why you should create content for them. Now, finding the right approach that works for your setup to creating great content is kind of why we're here. We're talking about the true cost of what that content looks like. The first option on the far, sort of low budget end of the spectrum is what I call run and gun. So it's also a see something, post something. It's oftentimes done in the moment, and it's capturing what it maybe lacks in a paid social budget or in a high quality content production budget. It can make up for by latching on to sort of cultural zeitgeist. So what's happening in social already, real time stuff, cultural conversation, adding to that and sort of becoming part of something that's already existing. So it is lower cost to execute. It's typically a junior staffer or a community manager and a non-professional camera or video equipment or a phone even, which makes the timelines a lot faster. You're out in the world, you're seeing how your brand plays out in real people's lives, and you're capturing that and usually posting it in pretty quick time. So not a long approval process or anything like that. This leads to greater perceived authenticity. It happened, and then the brand is talking about it in social. That's sort of how consumers use social. So the authenticity level is raised, which also creates a potential risk of missteps. Sometimes you join the wrong conversation. I think we've all seen brands do that. Or the content you capture isn't exactly what you would want to say if you had more time to think about it and more time to connect it to a strategy. And on the other end of the spectrum is what you see a lot of agencies doing. So they plan, they iterate, they measure. We call it see something, generate a testing plan. So you see something that might be kind of cool and you figure out whether it's going to work before you actually execute it. The test, rinse, repeat model. So typically it's higher quality and greater visibility for the content. You're creating less of it because it costs more to do. So each piece of content has to fill a greater gap in your content calendar. Usually you do this with paid, or you do it by extending the content over different channels on different time periods. There's a much more deliberate tie to the brand. So oftentimes, because there's a greater investment in this content, your client or your brand lead wants to see that this is going to do something from a business perspective. It's going to generate awareness. It's going to generate consideration. It's going to generate engagement and loyalty. They kind of need to see that that's going to happen before they'll sign off on doing it, which leads to longer timelines. You have to build a strategy. Oftentimes you have to spec out your creative. You have to concept things, then you build the creative and you have to get it approved. And sometimes you have edits and things like that. So you're planning a lot further out with this, which is of course a higher cost thing, not only from the literal, you're using professional equipment, you may engage with professional photographers, but there's a resource people sort of cost too. There's a lot of hours involved in planning, concepting and creating, and then even the posting and post measurement of it. So when we compare these two things against each other, you start to sort of see, and I think you can sort of start to see where your situation will fall into one of these two areas. Sometimes it's in between, but when you're talking hours and fees for run and gun, it's one or two junior staff, junior to mid-level staff who are often playing strategist and concepting and going out and shooting and ultimately posting. Whereas on the rinse and repeat, the longer high quality content, that's a full creative and management team. So there's somebody doing strategy, there's somebody concepting, there's somebody approving, there's somebody managing the relationship with the clients if you're an agency, and that all adds to the timeline and adds to the human resources cost. Equipment, run and gun is super minimal. You can do this with your phone. We all have cameras all the time, and lots of us are using them to create social content. For rinse and repeat, you're probably engaging with professional photographers and paying for their level of expertise and the gear that they use. Location is a really interesting one that I don't think everybody thinks about when they're doing cost considerations for content. When you're running and gunning, you're just in the moment, you're capturing your brands, usually out in the real world, which means if there's a target in the background, you're not really worrying about getting targets okay to post that, because chances are they're not going to come after you. But when you're creating more high quality content for more visible brands, that's something you have to consider. Every little thing has to be permitted and you have to get releases signed. I remember doing a beer photo shoot for social in the parking lot of my agency, and we had to get a location release from the building where the agency rented its office space. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And that adds to the timeline, of course, and it also adds to the cost because some producer has to spend time doing that. And then in post-production, for run and gun, you're probably using the onboard editing for the social platforms you're posting to, or some low-cost mobile apps. But with rinse and repeat, if you've invested in the time to connect this to a strategy, you've invested in a full creative concept and potentially in the resources to create it like a photographer, then there's a pro retouching fee involved too. So it adds up, it really does. But when you have to connect, you have to make sure every piece of creative connects to your strategy, and you're using professional grade people, then you understand where the costs can sort of weigh out. And finally, don't be afraid of the scale. There are a lot of creative ways to make content scale for you and to bring regular consumers and people who are used to creating content for brands into your content production strategy. UGC is a great one, user-generated content. Contests and promotions that encourage content creation. And then finally, influencers. You can get creative with how you pay for influencers by using media money. And we'll talk about each of these a little bit more in depth. For UGC, there's some great examples of brands that have done incredible things with UGC and encouraging people to do stuff that they already do. And that's the best UGC. It incorporates your brand into something that people naturally do, a behavior they naturally follow in social. But you want to be specific. You want to ask for exactly what you want to get. So your followers appreciate a good brief, just like any creative. Warby Parker is a really good example of this. When you order their 5 pairs of glasses to try on at home, it comes with a little card that encourages you to take selfies and ask your friends which frames you should get using the Warby Home Try On hashtag. So they've given you a very specific brief, and they've seen incredible results with it. If you know anyone if you have friends who bought glasses recently, chances are you've seen them post in social with their Warby Home Try On. Make it a bigger deal. Craft a bigger story for your followers to participate in. When they start to see other people doing it, they're more likely to participate themselves because they're not out on an island doing something that no one else is doing. Lululemon and Target are both great examples of this. Lululemon's The Sweat Life campaign, they just ask people to show them how they wear the Lululemon products. It can be working out, it can be when they're traveling and they're just in their leggings, although they're probably not flying a certain airline when they do that. Target had a recent campaign that was really awesome where they just highlighted the experience of getting your college acceptance. So they asked people to film themselves reading their college acceptance letters, and they took the best content they received and turned it into a television commercial. So that's the ultimate ego stroke. And that bottom point is make sure that when you ask people to do something, that they get something out of it. It doesn't have to be a tangible reward, but that they're recognized for participating. So even if you're not going to use their content because you've gotten thousands of pieces of UGC after your call to action, let them know you got it and you appreciate that they participated with your brand and they cared enough to take your request to heart. Contests and promotions are another awesome way to generate a good amount of content from people who love your brand and are willing to share that love in social. But you have to give them a really good reason to include your brand in something they're already doing. National Geographic ran a contest recently called Wanderlust, where they just recognized that their followers were posting travel pictures aligned with the brand of National Geographic, and just asked them to add the hashtag Wanderlust contest for a chance to win a trip to their dream Wanderlust location, I guess, where they always wanted to visit. Incentivizing with rewards that remind people of your brand is another great option. You can give them money, you could give them, a trip to the Super Bowl, but if it doesn't connect to your brand, then you don't have any extension. They go on the trip to the Super Bowl, they're not necessarily thinking about your brand when they're there, even though you provided the reward. So Starbucks is a great example of this. Their White Cup campaign They noticed people were already doodling on the white Starbucks cups, and they just asked them to do that in a more formal capacity, with the winning design chosen from social getting printed on a reusable plastic mug that was sold in Starbucks stores. Perfect way to connect what the ask was to a reward that's fully branded. Dormy noticed that people were taking selfies of themselves wearing the lingerie that's sold on the site, and turned it into a search for their next great model. And again, all of these brands did an amazing job of stroking the ego of the people who participated, thanking them, encouraging them to keep participating, encouraging them to bring their friends into the conversation. And then last thing in this area is influencers. Oftentimes you think influencers, paying an influencer is something that has to come from your social media budget or from your content development budget. But more and more we're seeing brands and agencies use their media budget. So rather than spending it on a display ad campaign or even paid social, they're paying influencers with that same money to create content that then is distributed to their networks. And the benefit there is that you borrow the equity of those influencers and the trust they've already built with their audiences. And you also get to keep the content and use it on your own channels. So rather than you creating content and putting it out there on a paid media plan, somebody else is creating content, you get their audience and you get the content to do what you want with. You can consider combining this with contests and promotions. The Corona example is a good one. They ran a contest a couple of summers ago called Capture Summer, where they asked photographers to share their favorite images of summer for a chance to spend the entire summer capturing the Corona experience. And so they got, in the lead up to it, all of these professional photographers with big Instagram followings posting pictures, asking Corona to consider them. And then they had someone spending the entire summer actually creating that content for Corona's Instagram and posting it on their Instagram. And they stroked that ego. They made sure that everybody who entered had a response from the brand and encouragement to keep enjoying summer from Corona. All right, so takeaways, just to keep in mind, knowing your audience and how they create content is going to be the most solid foundation you can have for when you start thinking about what your content creation process even looks like. Because if they're not consuming video or they're not creating video, then all of the costs that goes into creating video on your end may be wasted or may not be doing as much as it could for you. Understanding the pluses and minuses of content production processes. So you can create great content on any budget with any timeline and just about any amount of resources. One person with a phone creates great content, but know what those risks are, plan for them, and incorporate them into your consideration set when you think about the type of content you want to produce. Same on the other end. You can create beautiful content and spend, inordinate amounts of money on it. But if it's not doing some of the things that you lay out in your content strategy, then it's not doing as much as it could for you. And you might be better off scaling back your content creation costs and focusing on getting the content right before you spend a lot of money on higher quality versions of it. Get creative at scale. Think long and hard about ways to bring your fans and other people who appreciate your brand into the content creation process. A lot of times they're free or it's very low cost when you put a cost of content per piece to creating it in-house versus asking for UGC and then going through the process of getting permission to use it or giving something away in order to incentivize people to do it. The costs are very low per piece of content when you use UGC or you do contests and promotions. And then test and learn, constantly evaluate yourself. Make sure that the content you create is doing what you want it to do. And when it doesn't, figure out why. And if you're not sure, test it again. Social is the shortest feedback loop in marketing. It really is. You get instantaneous feedback as to whether or not something worked. And as you get to know your brand and you get to know what you can expect from your users on the pieces of content you create, you'll know when there's something that's an anomaly, when there's something that just didn't work, and you'll know it quickly, or there's something that's working better than everything else, you'll know it quickly. Evaluate those things, do a lot of analysis on the insight side so that you've got actionable things to go forward with. All right, I hope you guys are excited to talk a little bit. I'd love to hear your questions. Creating great content is my passion, and let's talk about it.
Thanks, Liz. Love the insight about really digging in and knowing your audience and recognizing them on a human level. It's really important to understand your audience and their behaviors and what they're really into. You're welcome to stick around for the next 10 minutes to ask any questions you have. And remember, you'll be able to access the recording of this session following the completion of the Q&A. Let's get to our first question. Question from YouTube, from Bethany Christian Services. They ask, how do you balance sounding human while needing to use standard pre-made responses or answers?
Okay, so if you have a sort of a customer care strategy that involves automated answers, I think the best thing to do is the audience anthropology that we talked about in the beginning. Make sure before you craft your predetermined answers that you've done enough listening to how your audience talks and how your audience interacts with you to know what their cadence looks like, some of the terminology that they use, some of the way they phrase things, which lifestyle things that they're talking about. That'll give you, I think, a little bit of a better way to craft your communication in the same style that they're using social. And that's really important if you want to feel like you have an emotional human connection with individual people.
Yeah, that's really important to know how your audience interacts with each other and the type of language that they're looking for. It gives them an idea that you actually know who they are and that you're not speaking to a whole different audience. Right. So another question from Shannon on YouTube. Do you have any tips for content that's specific for B2B companies?
Sure, great question. I think if you're talking about, we're a B2B company and this is sort of what we do. We try to position Sprout as a thought leader in the social space, not just the social platform management space. I think that's really important because in order to use our product or service, we're just one part of a larger marketing effort. And so the more we understand the pain points of our consumers from front to back with their marketing effort and where Sprout can best fill or address those pain points, the better relationship we're going to have with them. So if we are constantly just telling them that they need to publish, they need to analyze, they need to engage, that only speaks to their need for a social management tool. But if we start to understand that they're doing customer care and that they're doing creative development and they have team considerations and they have analysis considerations, then those are bigger stories that we can tell. I guess we try to make everyone's job in the B2B space. We try to show how Sprout makes your job easier and your life easier with our tool, but we understand what the full scope of what you're trying to do is.
Definitely, that's really great insight there. I think that a lot of B2B companies also tap into showing their company culture to see how they're a great place to work for and how they're really helping with employees' career development. So next question is along the lines similarly, if you're working solo, if you're a one-person team, do you have any best practices or tips for people who are on their own?
Yeah, I think planning, even though it's harder to do when there's only one person, planning is of the utmost importance, and making sure you have a holistic view of what you're trying to do for like a time period. So say you've got a specific campaign that runs 6 weeks, or you're trying to vary your messaging seasonally. Knowing what you're planning to do each week, each month, each quarter, whatever the time frame is that works for you, will help you, I think, cut down on questions you have to ask yourself. Like social, it's such a wide open landscape that I think we often overthink it. But planning ahead, at least thematically, is the greatest thing I can tell you to do. Know what time you're going to spend mapping out your content. Know how much time you're going to spend creating it. Know how much time you're going to spend analyzing it, and know how much time you're going to need to start the cycle over again. Will help keep you sane.
Definitely. I think that analysis is really a great tip here as well, to really pay attention to see what's performing, and so you know where to spend your time. Another question here from Nick asks, how do you create quality content when higher-ups aren't fully sold on the value of it?
Ooh, great question. This is where I think you put in a little bit of extra effort to understand what. So if your boss reports to the CMO and his or her primary objective is to drive awareness for the brand, then you need to understand what he or she is trying to show their boss and prove how social can do that, what social can add to that. Sort of figure out where their pain points are, speak their language, and show them that social can address not only what you're trying to do or what your department is trying to do, but whatever their ultimate goal is for the company or for the division.
Great point on speaking their language. I think that senior leadership really just wants to know how what you're doing is going to achieve the business's bottom line.
Yeah, we had to do that.
Next question from Mickey O, sorry. When is a good time to start spending on sponsored posts?
Paid social. When you have a clearly defined objective for what you want social to do. Especially on Facebook, you have a really powerful ad buying platform that optimizes your content for whatever your objective is. So if your objective is video views, you buy a specific Facebook product for that. If your objective is engagement, then you buy a specific Facebook product for that. It's algorithmically inclined to do what you want the content to do. You just have to know what that is. So first step is, what do you want this content to do? What objective is clear enough that you want to spend money on it? If you don't know yet, then it's not yet time to put money behind your post. Put organic stuff out there. There's a lot of great tips on the Insight blog about how to sort of hack the organic algorithms on the various platforms to get better reach out of posts that you're not promoting. So if you employ some of those tactics and try a bunch of different things and start to see that engagement is doing the most for your brand and social, then you might be ready to start testing putting money behind an engagement ad buy.
Definitely. Yeah, those are definitely great insights. So next question is from Alex. They are curious, or if you have any insights about how other mid-sized companies operate in terms of a social team. Do companies have a single person or groups that handle social as a team?
I think you can connect this directly to the question about how to sell in senior leadership on the value of social. If senior leadership is bought in, then they understand the value of someone who's focused on social strategy and someone who's focused on the actual content creation. If you want to go one step further, a lot of organizations will add a third person who's focused on metrics. So they're handling all of the analysis and breaking that analysis down into key insights that are actionable for the brand. So for instance, a great analyst can take a whole bunch of data and give you like 5 to 10 bullet points that are actionable no matter who you are. If you're not a math person or you're not a numbers person, you can still read the stuff and say, I see that content posted between 12 and noon was most effective for driving video views. And you can take that into the next step of creating content. So if you're going to hire one extra person, hire somebody who's good at analysis.
Definitely, that's really important. Analysis is really key to knowing what's performing and where you should be spending your time and ultimately where you should be spending your money. So a bit of a change here. We've got a question from the Gift of Life Marrow Registry, and they ask, what contests do you suggest for nonprofits or smaller budget-strapped organizations?
Great question. Well, this goes back to the audience anthropology point. Figure out what they are passionate about that aligns with your brand. So if marrow donation is the ultimate message that you're trying to use social to distribute, then why are people following you? Have they had a personal connection with someone who needed a marrow transplant? Are they personally invested in the idea of, bettering the people around them, and that's why they're willing to donate time or resources or marrow to your cause? And ask them to create content or to write an essay or to respond to a question that directly relates to that. So something along the lines of, why are you passionate about this cause, is a really simple place to start. And if that means showing an image of someone who's been directly affected by that and sharing that on social, that's great. Tagging someone that they want to bring into the cause as either a donor or a supporter or someone who can help distribute the message is another way to go. So figure out why they're following you and what they're passionate about that aligns with your brand directly, and something that they'll naturally do. Most people are willing to post a selfie. Most people are willing to tag a friend who they think might be interested. Most people are willing to answer a question about something they're passionate about. So those are all natural behaviors for social that align with something that your organization is already trying to achieve.
Definitely. I think that nonprofits or organizations that are mission focused should really just tap into what they do and highlight all the good that they're doing, because that's their main goal, and people are passionate about a lot of these causes. So we have time for one last question, and this comes from Christina, and they ask, how do you retain a social audience if you have a product that is a one-time use? For example, wedding gowns, prom dresses.
Well, those two examples specifically are one-time use products that are tied to a very, very emotional experience and something that you probably remember for your entire life. And speaking, I guess, as someone who has both gone to prom and had a wedding, I have always felt like almost like a mentor to people who have not yet had either of those experiences. And so when I had gone to prom and then I went off to college, I remember talking to my sister and her friends about prom when it came up for them. And even though I wasn't going to use my prom dress again, I relived my experience through the eyes of somebody who was going through it for the first time. Same thing with my wedding. When I have friends who got married after me, it was a big part of the bonding experience with them to celebrate, what my wedding meant to me and what they were about to go through and the memories they were about to create. So I think it's something that you never outgrow, even though the product is gone, and that you're continually serving as someone who's already experienced that for people who are going through it for the first time. So making I don't know, this is just sort of off the top of my head, but making a mentor relationship for weddings to keep you sane, to make decisions, to help you cull what's important from what's not as you're planning your wedding, and having someone to lean on to do that, you could create a really interesting sort of almost network of people who are willing to help someone who's having their first experience buying a wedding gown.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. It's really great insight there on tapping into the emotional value of a product rather than just a one-time use. So friends, it looks like our time has come to an end. On behalf of Sprout, we want to thank all of you for attending this session. And again, thank you to Liz for your time. It was amazing. Keep your eyes peeled. We're going to compile some of the major takeaways from this session and share it with all of you. So feel free to continue the conversation on social media using the hashtag Sprout Sessions, or reach out to Liz herself. From all of us at Sprout, have a great summer. Thank you.